world has changed. Today, our national security can be threatened in faraway places. It's up to all of us to be aware of the strategic importance of such places and to be able to identify them.
As the political climate became increasingly violent in Grenada under the Labour Party, the opposition New Jewel movement established an armed wing called the 12 Apostles, which took power in 1979 while the Prime Minister was out of the country at the UN. The new leader was a parliamentarian named Maurice Bishop, who had served as opposition movement leader for years. Grenada became a Leninist state based upon a Soviet model and became very close to Cuba. The New Jewel government at this time began a variety of construction projects, including a new international airport. At this point in the early 1980s, newly elected American President Ronald Reagan turned his attention to the small island nation.
The nearly defenseless people in a region of great strategic importance to the free world will have a chance someday to live lives free of murder and mayhem and terrorism.
He publicly accused Grenada of using this airstrip as a waypoint for Soviet arms and began to frame Grenada not as an isolated nation dealing with its internal issues, but as a Soviet puppet, the next domino to fall to the Soviet menace.
A delegation of us, black journalists from the United States, were in Grenada only less than 2 months before that invasion. And we could testify that the Cubans at the Port Salinas airport were nothing other than fat, pot-bellied construction workers as they exist the world over, not military men at all. And of course, the journalists who were there from the major media could have seen that as well, but they instead spread the big lie that somehow the United States was interrupting a Cuban occupation of the country. When the United States made it appear as if Grenada was a base for Cuban operatives, the media started looking for them and imagining them and passing on reports of Cubans in military capacities.
Reagan and the United States of America's strategic anti-Soviet goals formed the public rationale for their intervention in Grenada. During the administration of New Jewel leader Maurice Bishop, women's rights, anti-racism, proletariat issues, and opposition to the South African apartheid state were priorities. In Grenada, women's equal pay was codified under law, concurrent to the U.S.'s struggle and eventual failure to pass the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment. The New Jewel government refused to hold elections of an American style and stifled the commercial press. This was criticized by the Americans, but Grenada countered that the various mass organizations rendered Grenada a true democracy. The situation in Grenada was calm following the revolution until the Prime Minister refused to step down, which was what his party had requested. He was placed on house arrest. Protests developed on parts of the island in response. The protesters were able to reach Bishop's house and release him. Eventually, a battle ensued, with both Bishop and a number of civilians being killed. After Bishop's death, New Jewel continued with Bernard Coard as the head, as had been planned. This only lasted 5 days, when the army toppled his government. Factional disputes, so common in communist nations in the Soviet model, was the beginning of the end for Grenada. The military was harsh from the beginning, imposing a curfew punishable by death. This military government lasted 6 days before the United States and 6 island nations invaded Grenada. The adversarial tone between the U.S. and revolutionary Grenada had begun much earlier, when President Ronald Reagan refused to meet with the Marxist Prime Minister. The invasion from outside the U.S. seemed bizarre. While the international media reported on the UN statements declaring the war illegal under international law, the U.S. media parroted Reagan administration statements about the Sovietization of the Caribbean and raising concerns about the welfare of American students on the island.
You seem to say that the media got it wrong when covering this event. How so?
Well, in the first 48 hours, they squealed and screamed and cried about not getting access to the island or even being allowed to get on battleships and such. I think your film talked about that. But after that first 48 hours, when the U.S. government felt more comfortable allowing media folks to be on the island and embedded with the troops, they performed as if they were spokespersons for the U.S. military. There was not the slightest trace of independence whatsoever. When the U.S. military made it clear that it was going to base this invasion on partially on a threat to U.S. medical students on the island, the U.S. media jumped in as if there really was a threat. Of course, there wasn't. That's why none of the medical students were hurt.
The obfuscation of the real reasons for invading the island nation have been well documented in Inventing Reality, The Politics of the Mass Media by Michael Parenti. The United Nations General Assembly, by a vote of 108 to 9, voted that this action was a flagrant violation of international law. Despite this, the invasion went through and the New Jewel government was toppled.
I will not ask you to pray for the dead, because they're safe in God's loving arms and beyond need of our prayers. I would like to ask you all, wherever you may be in this blessed land, to pray for these wounded young men and to pray for the bereaved families of those who gave their lives for our freedom. God bless you, and God bless America.